This is Canadian folk musician Jesse Ferguson, and today I'm going to show you how to change guitar strings on an acoustic guitar, but basically the same principles apply if you're changing them on an electric guitar or a nylon string guitar with some minor variations. Now, when should you change your strings, or how often should you change them? Well, that's a somewhat personal question, and it will depend on how much you play your guitar and how much you insist on having that new nice crisp resonance that comes with a new set of strings. So some practicing musicians, professional musicians who tour around, they change them weekly or even every few days. Personally, I think that's a bit much, even if you are playing like a professional musician. And one of the reasons that it might be problematic to change them that much is that when you first install a new set of strings, they'll constantly be going out of tune as they stretch and relax, etc. So you really, they're about 1 to 2 days at least when you're constantly just tuning that guitar over and over and over again. So how often do I change them? I change them once every 6 months. So I put it on my calendar to change the strings on all of my guitars and my mandolin, and I also check the smoke detector at the same time. So you can put those both together on your calendar and you'll never forget to change your strings or when you last did it. So if you want to, you can certainly do more, you can certainly do less. I wouldn't advise going more than a year between changing your strings, because then they become deadened through gunk, and the metals do break down over time. You will notice little sort of grooves where the fret wire has dug into your strings. And it also increases the risk that they will eventually snap on you, potentially on stage or if you're performing somewhere, which is inconvenient to say the least. So better to change them, I'd say at the very most once a year, but probably better 6 months or under to change them. And if you get inexpensive strings like I get, these are Martin SPs, not very expensive. I think about $8 a set, $6, $7 or $8 a set, something like that in Canada. So it's not that big a deal. If you have multiple guitars, it could cost you more, but at any rate. So what do you need to change your strings? Safety glasses, because strings can snap while you're changing them. So protect your eyes. Also consider, if you have little children around who might be interested in what you're doing, be mindful of their eyes too, because the razor sharp wire at the end of the strings could scratch their eyes easily. Particularly if a string snaps, it goes off with force. So you can do it without safety glasses, but it's not advisable. What else do you need? Well, you need some kind of device for trimming the wires. So needle nose pliers, what I use. You could use just side cutters, but the needle nose pliers come in handy for an extra step that I do with the unwound, just bare steel wires. A tuner, digital tuner, or whatever kind of tuner you prefer, so that whenever you're bringing them back up to pitch, the new set, you will be able to keep them in tune. And this is optional, but you can use a string winder, which goes on the machine head and allows you to very quickly wrap them up, change your strings and so on, and bring them back up to pitch. It's about $1.50 or something like that at most music shops. Well worth picking up. Put one on each of your guitar cases. It'll save you wrist strain too. If you do them by hand, if you have as many instruments as I do, it can cause you some grief with your hands getting cramped. Okay, so that's what you need to do to change them. And the other thing with these winders is they have a little section right here. Trying to do this backwards, where there's a little groove. You use that for removing these little pegs that hold the strings in. So if you do that with your pliers, you can mar the plastic that's on these little pegs, whatever they're called. So much better to do them with the plastic wrench, the right tool for the job, right? Okay, so how do you begin? Well, I usually take them, I open the box first of the new strings. And be mindful when you open the envelopes that they will uncoil the strings are coiled inside. You get 3 envelopes, 2 strings in each one, and they're labeled which strings are in each envelope. Watch your eyes and the eyes of your pets or children who are sitting around, because when you open them, they come coiled like that, but when you take them out, they sort of uncoil with a bit of force. And again, these little pointy ends are razor sharp. So, you want to watch those. They can really pick you. Imagine getting that in the eye. So, which envelope did I open there? That was the high E and the D, which are bronze wound. So those are the 2 strings I'll take off first, and then put the new ones on. So you know which ones you're dealing with because it says right on the envelope. Is it a good idea to take them all off at once and then put them all back on? Generally speaking, it's not a good idea to take all the strings off at once, because that can mess with your truss rod, because the neck is under a lot of tension when the strings are on at pitch. So if you remove all of them, you could potentially end up with problems of cracking or throwing off the intonation by adjusting the tension in your truss rod. So much safer to do 1 string at a time, and that will keep almost the same amount of tension that was on it before. So, that was the high E. So, usually what I do, and it's a good place to do it on, say, a couch, which is what I'm doing it on right now. I'm kneeling down beside the couch. On a bed is great. If you do it on your knees, there's quite a good possibility that it will slip off your knees while you're noodling around with all this stuff and fall on the ground. So, you put your winder on, and I usually pluck the string to make sure I'm going the right way. So as you notice, the pitch went down. Make sure you're winding the correct one whenever you pluck, or unwinding in this case. So, unwind a bit, then you can go from the top and unwind the rest, which is faster than cranking. And once you get down to the end, there's a little step that I do, which I'll show you later, that involves double wrapping on the machine head. These are called the machine heads. The little geared, well, technically they're machines, simple machines. And so you just pull it out. So that's released from the headstock, the head. Then you come down to the end of the guitar, and again, use your little tool with the groove. Let's see if I can get that to display properly. Not really. There's a little U-shaped groove there. That slips onto the plastic peg. Push it in. The peg pops right up. Remove it. Try not to drop it in the sound hole. It just becomes a pain to get them out after. So there's your peg. Pull the old string out. And first thing I do is coil it back up and wrap it a few times. Wrap the loose tail inside just to make a little bundle out of it. You'll notice that my cats might come in. They're famously attracted by the strings bobbing up and down. Makes a great little toy. So now I've got that bound. If you try to shove this in the garbage can without coiling them first, they're going to spring out everywhere and be very much a pain to get rid of in the garbage can. So I put them wound up like that in the envelope back where they came from. Now I know which string that is and which envelope it is in. You can hold on to these if you want as spares, but in my mind it's not worth it. You can get spare strings for $1 a piece usually if you get them loose at the music store. So you're going to throw an old string on that's probably going to snap on you and was dead to begin with. It's up to you. Certainly better than not having any string at all. Speak of the devil, here comes the cat. So, now I grab the corresponding string, which is the unwound, the thin one, the high E. So, first thing first, the cats are growling at each other here. First things first, grab the brass end, the one with the little brass loop. That goes inside the hole. And you'll notice that these pegs, these plastic pegs, have a little groove on them. So that groove faces the string. I'm doing this a little bit reversed from how I normally do it. So the peg slips in. The little brass ball is inside the hole already. The peg goes down, and then yank on the string. Yank on it. Because that little ball, that little steel loop, or brass loop, has got to be seated up firmly this way against that pin. So if you just push it in, push the peg down, and then pull this way, eventually what's going to happen is that little loop, the brass loop, is going to slip around and then slide forward all of a sudden, which may cause the peg to pop up, or it may just cause the string to break or something like that. So you want to give it a good yank up first, seat it, push down firmly on there, and then pull forward this way towards the headstock to make sure that it's in there good and solid. Okay, so now I'm going to bring me back up to the headstock. And there's a little hole drilled in the head, in each machine head, the pin. So you put that, feed the working end, the tag end of the string in through. Now, I've got it looped in there. How much do I need? Well, you can't overdo it in terms of how many wraps you get on the peg. You can underdo it in terms of it slipping. So I do something about that, 4 fingers. My dad does 3 fingers. I like 4. I use a winder so it doesn't take me that much. So you kink it now. Pull them this way, kink it against the wire, against the machine head. And where the kink is, it has to stay there now. If you kink twice in a different spot, that's someplace where it's likely going to break on you. So, now, you want to wind all of your strings the same way, and they're going to start from the center of the nut, this is called the nut, and go towards the machine heads out. So you don't want to wrap from the outside in as though you were bringing that string in and pushing it that way. You want it to wind out so that the tension is combining inwards towards the nut. Possibly you could do it the other way, but it's better in terms of the forces involved to have it come in and then out. So now I start winding, and you notice the way I'm holding this here. I've got the slack held in my ring finger and my middle finger. My pointer finger is pushing down, so I'm keeping the tension on the string. If you don't keep tension up at the machine head, it's going to slip on you, and again, you may end up kinking the string twice up here, which you don't want. So that's how I keep the tension there. Once the string comes down, because it's getting tighter, I'll remove these fingers. So I'm going to keep winding. Make sure you're going the right direction. Watch what you're doing. And another thing I like to do, just to be doubly sure with these only steel wires, the ones that aren't wound in brass, so that's the high E and the B, is I bring the working end, the tail, it's hard to see here. You'll have to trust me, there it is, catching the light. I bring it back around one more time through the hole. And then I pull that tight again. That's the extra bit that I do with just the 2 bare steel wires. And that's why I use a pair of needle nose pliers when I'm removing the old ones, to remove that little D loop, pull it out. And the reason I do it only on these one is because the bare steel wires have a tendency to slip, even with adequate numbers of wraps, just depending on certain brands or whatever the conditions might be. If there's some oil on them from the factory, they have a tendency to slip that way and constantly be losing pitch. So that's why I do that. Again, so you feed it through once, feed it through one more time, and then cinch it down. And technically that makes, I guess technically, a knot on there. So then you continue winding. As the tail, the loose tail, comes around, you want to feed it over the string that's going towards the bridge. So as it comes around, it might want to go under or over this loose end. You want it to go over so that the wraps are going down towards the head. So as it spins, it's going, this part of the string is going down closer to the actual wood or whatever material it is that's here. And the reason for that is that it makes the tension on the string more out of line with the neck. You don't want, you'll notice that a neck is angled down, the head from the neck. You want to preserve that as much as you can by having the string winding down, down, down. And that makes the tension on the string it doesn't interfere with the intonation, in other words. So at any rate, that's the best way to go, I would say. So whenever the tail comes back around, you feed it over, and that will ensure that the wraps are going down. And every once in a while you can just push that with your finger to keep it going under the previous wraps. And you want to make this as neat as you can. I mean, you can get carried away with the neatness. And then as you get close to it being in pitch, strum it. Because it's easy at this point, especially with a wrench, to really over torque it, and you think that you're bringing it up to the right pitch, but you actually have gone way over what you need, and that's where it will break on you. So if you ring it, you'll be able to know, if you know the correct pitch of your strings. And so this is the high E. I can strum the low E. And bring them up to roughly the same pitch. Don't bother getting it too perfect now, because as you change the other strings, you will basically be throwing the other ones all out. You're going to have to tune your guitar multiple times before you're done on this. So just get it something close. So that's it for the high E. So I'm going to do all the other ones now and bring you back once that's done, because it will be a bit tedious. Maybe I'll do the, which string was that? Where's my other one? There it is. The envelope. I'll do the D, just to show you one that is brass round, and then I'll do the rest off camera, just so that you're not bored to tears here. So it's the same deal. Find the D, E, A, D. Make sure you've got the right one. So just give it a few good winds to loosen the tension up. And that allows you to just bring it over the top, which saves you a bit of time. Once it gets really loose, you might as well bring it over the top like this and release them. And as I said, I only do that extra wrap on the ones that are bare steel. These ones that are brass wound, I don't bother with that. So there, that's released. Bring my tool here back to the right one. Release the tension on that peg. Pull out the oiled string, the old string. Coil it. Wrap the end a couple of times. And in the envelope it goes. Now those two are done. I know which ones they were because it's written right on the envelope. So I grab the corresponding string from the new pack. Find my little peg. Remembering that the groove that's in the peg faces the head. So the string goes in. The peg goes in behind it. Hold the peg with my thumb, yank up until that little brass loop seats, and then push down again. Give it a good solid yank. Not with all your might, but a good solid tug to make sure that that loop is seated against the little plastic peg. Pull it forward, and same deal. As I said, I want this string to come in and out, not out and in. They're all going to run the same way. In, from the head, out. Doesn't matter what three set of strings you're talking about. The top three or the bottom three, they're all going to start in the middle and start and branch out. So here, you can get away with even fewer wraps because these brass wound ones create more friction on the headstock, on the machine head, that is. So you kink it. Again, putting pressure. Here I'm using my thumb and my fingers. It doesn't really make any difference. You could do it with your pointer and the remainder. Again, that's what that looks like. Because if there's no tension at all on the machine head, it causes some grief in terms of it wanting to slip out. So here is one where, which way am I going? Make sure you're going the correct way when you're winding. And it's a bit awkward because I'm trying to demonstrate it on camera. So again, the tag end that comes around goes over the top. And that pushes all the wraps down. If you need to push that down with your thumb or your finger, again, then do so. So here comes the tag end again, around. So you see what happens here, it catches on the other machine head, and that will release with force with this razor sharp piece of wire. That's why you need to watch if your cat's coming to watch or something like that. Watch the cat's eyes, your kids especially. The cat's got pretty good reflexes, but still you could scratch a cornea with that little whipping tail coming around. So as you get closer to it being done, make sure you're in the correct groove at the nut. Again, that's the piece of plastic here. Make sure it goes into the correct groove there. So that's the one. So you can go to the 5th fret. Again, don't try to get it perfect at this point because it's just going to need retuning 100 times before you're done. Well, a few times. So if you go to the 5th fret, I'm sure you all know that trick for tuning your guitar. It's supposed to be the same. So that's the A string at 5th, and that's open D. It should be the same. So that's the D string and the E high E. I'll bring you back once they're all done, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, we're back now. Now I've changed all 6 strings. You'll notice the tails, the tag ends are long. Now, what's the next step? Well, if you strum it, let's say a G major chord, it sounds like garbage, right? And that's obviously because they're not tuned yet. So what do you do to tune them? Well, again, you want a tuner. Now my guitar has a tuner built in. I still prefer using one of these chromatic tuners. This one's made by Boss, which is, I highly recommend this one. But one of the features of this one, which I love, is when I turn it on, is that it auto recognizes what chord what string you're trying to tune, which is very helpful. You don't have to press a certain button for the A string or the E string, etc. It just does that on its own. Now, whenever you're tuning a guitar, changing the strings, or if you say have an old guitar that you haven't tuned in a long time, the strings may in fact be so out of tune that they register as a different string. So if you're, say, your high E string is so low, so flat, it might register as a B. So that can throw you off. So you really want to take care, excuse me, that A, you know what the names of the strings are, what letters that correspond to each of these strings, what they're supposed to be, so that when you start using your tuner to bring it all up to pitch now, once you put the new strings on, that you're not trying to tune a B string to a high E pitch, because you'll snap the string. So pay attention to what letter displays on the screen of your tuner, or if you have one where you have to select which note you're trying to tune to, which string, that you're matching that string to what it's supposed to be, because it's quite easy, and I've done it before, to try to keep tuning, and you say, well, it should be getting there by now, it should actually be getting close to pitch, but you're over tuning it, and it will snap. I think maybe what I would have done possibly in that case was I was trying to tune it a full octave higher than it should have been. So that's where having another guitar that is in tune might help you. Or actually on this one you can actually hit, there's a button that allows you to play the sound that you're looking for. You can choose a different value. So whichever pitch you're trying to achieve. So that might help you at first. Personally, I don't like that, but so in other words, if you're trying to get the low E sound, it will play a low E for you that you can tune up to. At any rate, I'm going to start right now, but the first thing first is you need to stretch your strings. And it might sound a bit strange to think, well, it's steel, how does it stretch? Well, it is. It does have tensile strength. It stretches. And if you don't stretch before you tune, you're going to be wasting a lot of time tuning over and over and over again. What you want to do is reduce the amount of time you have to spend tuning that guitar every day for the next few days. If you don't stretch it all first, you're going to be tuning constantly throughout your practice sessions over and over again, and it's always going to sound like it's slipping. So what you want to do is pre-stretch them. It's just like, say, pre-shrunk denim or something like that. If you get jeans that are already pre-shrunk, well, you can throw them in the washing machine after, and you're not going to have to worry about shrinking. So this is the same principle. So how do you do it? Well, I'll give this disclaimer first that you will probably, before you're done changing a few sets of strings, you will break a string during this set. So if you don't want to do the stretching, then that's up to you. To my mind, if the string's going to break due to a factory defect or some kind of mistake I made during installation, maybe kinking the string too hard or something like that at the machine head, I want to find that out now when I've got all my gear out for changing strings and not in the middle of a set whenever I'm playing at the pub or something like that. So if it's going to break, I want it to break now. So how do you do it? Well, you grab each string individually, just one at a time. Grab it between your thumb and your finger. Remember, you got to have your safety glasses on. This is the time you really need them on. And don't have your kid at the end of the guitar or something like that watching what you're doing, unless he or she also has some safety glasses on. So grab it here with that, and usually what I do is I go about halfway down to the neck, down to the bridge, so about halfway on the string. This hand is not doing anything. It could just be steadying the guitar, and pull up gently. Don't go too quickly, but gently up and out on all of them. So that one's done. Move down. And I'm giving quite a bit of force here, a lot more than you would in average playing. And you will sometimes hear a clicking sound at the bridge where the strings are sort of settling. Like I said, if you yank on the string as you put the peg in, you won't be hearing all kinds of disconcerting snaps and cracks down there at this point. You hear there's almost nothing going on there. If you don't have glasses on, I strongly recommend you turn your head away and or close your eyes when you're doing this part. You don't need to see what you're doing. But if it's going to break, it's going to go off with force, and your eye you don't want to have your eye in the wrong in its path. So here you go, just stretching. You could go through this one more time if you really wanted to, but I'm giving quite a bit of force. You can also use a sort of rocking force. You put your palm against the strings and rock up, hooking it like so. And I'm giving it quite a bit of force. As I said, if it's going to break, I want it to break now. So now that really stretched them all. So now you try to bring them up to pitch. So it's registering a C sharp on my tuner right now. So I know that has to go all the way through C, D, up to E. Don't worry about getting it perfect at this point. So that's the E. So you know that trick, I'm sure, about tuning your guitar. You press the string on the 5th fret, and the one below it should be open, should be the same. So that's getting close. Now here's where it gets a bit trickier. I'll bring the high E up. Which one should you do first, the high E or the low E? In my mind, in my experience, it doesn't make any difference. I've heard some guitarists say that you should always tune from top to bottom, etc. To me, it makes no difference. I generally do it from top to bottom, so from the low E to the high E. So that one's up around the right place. Now the B. I'm sure this is thrilling to watch. This is the G. Everybody loves to sit around and listen while someone tunes a guitar, right? So, there we go. I brought them all up once. Now you're going to have to do it all over again. Now, if you haven't already dozed off, you're definitely a die-hard guitar string changer. And I commend you. You can get really finicky with this if you want. In my mind, tuning your guitar, especially when it's been really out or when you just installed strings, it's better to get them all close, then go back and fine-tune. Don't try to fine-tune one string at a time, because if the low E is really out and you bring the high E up perfect, once you bring the low E back in close, it's going to throw the high E out, because they're all they all influence each other, right, in terms of the tension on the neck. So I'll spare you any more tinkering. We're getting close there. Getting close. You have that nice resonance and brightness that you get with a new set of strings. Sounds great. None of them broke. That's great. Don't count on none of them breaking still. It's always a good idea to have a spare set of strings in your guitar case. I'm sure you all know that, but stretch them again and listen to what happens now. Again, you want to stretch them all out. Actually, that's not that bad. It's because I stretched them pretty hard the first time. But every time you sit down, leave your guitar for an hour, or play it for an hour, and you'll have to tune them again when the strings are new like that. But it's a fun little ritual. I do it every 6 months. You know, you put something interesting on YouTube on, or watch TV or whatever while you're doing it. There we go. Now, what to do about these long tails? Well, some people think it's cool to leave them on. Mostly young guys I've seen do that. To me, there's no point. They make noise whenever they rattle together, which you don't want that on a track when you're playing. There's no conceivable reason to leave them on except for the look of it. Now, in my early days of changing strings on guitars, mandolins, etc., I would leave them on for the first night, because if something happened where the string was slipping, or it popped out at the bridge, the peg popped out, then having this extra left on would allow you to more easily put it back on and try to salvage that string. But nowadays, if you do it properly when you install them, that's not going to happen. So I would just clip them off. So you can either use the little cutting part in your needle nose pliers, but it's much preferable, I would say, to, where am I here, to just use purpose-made side cutters. So you can get in much closer. So make sure you don't nick any of the other strings while you're doing this. Pay close attention that you only cut the string you want, because if you nick anything there, it's going to be the end of that string, of course. So just cut them off. The other thing too is, if you leave them on because you think it looks cool, is, again, you have a kid or an animal or something like that around while you're playing, or even yourself when you're taking the guitar off and on with your strap and so on, you're very likely to poke yourself in the eye. So, other little tips. It's a good idea when you buy your strings, if you buy extra sets, but you should always have a couple of sets on hand, is date them when you purchase them. Because if you're like me, you have 25 boxes all over the place and you don't know which ones are the old ones. And they do corrode over time. So if you have a box of strings sitting in your basement for 10 years, chances are they're going to snap when you put them on, or at the very least not sound as bright and fresh as a brand new set. So you want to use the old ones first and then rotate them out that way. So here's a close-up of the bridge, in case you want to see that. As we said, once you put the peg in, the little groove that's in the peg faces that way, and the string obviously is in front of the peg. Push it in good and hard. If they popped up a little bit once you brought the strings to pitch, then just shove them in as hard as you can with your thumb. They're probably not going to come out anyway. If it's really up high, you don't want that, but generally speaking, if they're a little proud, as they say, a little high, that's not the end of the world. Push it in hard, because the force is all going that way. It's not coming up usually. Most of the force is directed that way. So even if it's a little bit high, I don't think you've lost that string. What else about strings? I think that's about it. It's a pleasure to have new strings. So if you've got a guitar in your closet that you haven't changed the strings, you don't even know how old they are, for $5, $6, go get a set of strings, put them on, and that guitar will sound like a dream for a good long while. It'll be nice and resonant. It won't be all full of grime from your fingers and so on. So it is quite a pleasure to put on a new set of strings. In some places, you can actually recycle the old strings, and they'll send them to kids in, say, the third world or something like that. So certainly your old strings, if they've got a little bit of life left in them, you could look into that option. Otherwise, I just throw mine out. I usually play them until they're not much good. I wouldn't want to send them down to the third world and poor kid get my my old corroded, ready to break strings. So at any rate, I shove the envelopes back in the box, and that way the strings are all nice and neat for throwing out, and they're not going to punch holes through your plastic bag and your garbage can. So hopefully you like that. I do have an instructional video on how to play guitar if you don't know how to do that yet, as well as other videos of my music and traditional folk music and so on. So hopefully you liked it. You can check out my website if you're interested in finding out more about me, and happy strumming.